Hi, my name is Christian Redman, and today we are going to be talking about the end times and the second coming of Christ. So, the main book that I'm going to be looking through is the book of Revelation, obviously. As a disclaimer, I do want to say that chances are there's going to be something that I say that is wrong. And the reason why is because I'm trying to interpret something that hasn't happened yet. And chances are when you're trying to interpret events that haven't happened yet, you're probably going to get something wrong. And I think that's an important thing to always make a disclaimer about when you're talking about the book of Revelation, to never think that you know exactly how things are going to go down. Because it says, Jesus himself said, only the Father knows truly what's going to happen in the end times. Another thing that I'm going to be talking about is I'm going to be addressing some misconceptions that people have built up over the years about the end times. So let's dive right into it. First off, I want to talk about the connections to the first century that the book of Revelation has. I believe that the book of Revelation actually mirrors the first century Christians to the last century or the last generation of Christians. And the reason why I believe this is because a lot of the references that we have to the Antichrist and to the mark of the beast and to these events that happen in the end times can actually be mirrored and be related to things that were currently happening in the first generation. For example, Emperor Nero, or Caesar Nero, he was a figure that was similar to the description of the Antichrist because he was persecuting Christians, trying to get people to worship him as God, and his name actually was written on currency, which is thought to be what the mark of the beast actually is currency. And it's important to recognize that the name that was written on the currency was Caesar Nero, which calculates to 666 in that language. So with these connections, I think it's important to recognize and realize that the reason why we were given the book of Revelation is for that reason exactly, because in the first century, Christians were being persecuted. And I think no matter what generation that you're born into, there's always going to be persecution of Christians. And so the book of Revelation actually gives a very hopeful ending for Christians being persecuted. So I think that's the purpose of why we were given the book of Revelation, not as a fortune-telling device or something to speculate about the future, but to show that the future, regardless of all these evil things, all these bad things that are going to happen, there's hope in the future, and God wins in the end. I think that's probably the most important takeaway you can have when talking about the book of Revelation. Next thing I want to talk about is the rapture. So there's a lot of misconceptions have been built up over the rapture. Number one, there's a lot of Christians who don't believe that the rapture is actually a biblical event. And the reason why is because it's a more recent doctrine that's been introduced to the church. And it's been introduced in the 1800s, which is pretty recent. However, I don't think something being recent makes it any less valid. I think that the doctrine has been there this whole time. It's just been discovered more recently. Main reasons why is because the three verses I've put up here are only just a few of the examples that we have of an event that sounds a lot like the rapture. Another thing to talk about is the fact that the Trinity is never blatantly talked about in the Bible, but the idea of the Trinity is taught throughout the Bible, which is very similar to the rapture. There's no word rapture in the Bible, but the idea is taught. Some main misconceptions that have been built up thanks to book series like the Left Behind series, and media has kind of distorted what the rapture is actually going to look like. In fact, there was a Simpsons episode that kind of depicted things that aren't actually biblical that have to do with the rapture. And some things to talk about with that is, number one, Jesus is always present in this event. Like, it's always a rapturing to Jesus. And another thing is that before the rapture takes place, before believers who are still alive are raised up to Jesus, we actually see the dead will come to life. So there's a resurrection of the dead who will raise up and meet Jesus in the clouds, meet Jesus in the sky, and return to heaven with him. So I think this is something important to point out. If you're missing those things, I think you've got the wrong theology about the rapture. Another thing I want to briefly talk about is the mark of the beast. A couple things to talk about here are two fears that people have. Number one, people fear that they might accidentally get the mark of the beast. However, this is an impossible thing because no one in the end is going to accidentally get the mark of the beast, because in Revelation it says that before the mark of the beast is handed out, that an angel will announce to the world, warning people not to get this because it's an unforgivable sin. So there's no such thing as accidentally getting the mark of the beast. And number two, us as Christians, we're not meant to fear the Antichrist. And this actually kind of slides into my conclusion on this whole topic, is I think a lot of Christians and a lot of people fear the end times in general. However, we're not told about the Antichrist, and we're not told about the mark of the beast to cause fear. We're told about these things to point out that regardless of these bad things that are going to be going down in the end times, there's a hope. We're meant to focus on the last two chapters, or the last couple chapters of the book of Revelation, which is the fact that God wins in the end. Jesus will come back and he will wipe away all the tears, and we will not have sin anymore, which is a beautiful thing. Amen.